Our wish list for Trajan Langdon as the new president of basketball operations for the Detroit Pistons, and Donovan Clingan as a potential draft pick at number 5, and what that means for the future of Jalen Duren. All that and more on this edition of the Palace of Pistons Podcast, part of the Believe Network.
Good evening, everybody, and welcome to another exciting night of NBA basketball.
The Pistons are digging in. They got the depth. They got the big men. They got the better basketball team. No doubt about it.
Pistons need a three, and they have just under 3 seconds to do it. Here's Chauncey Billups. Here it is. He's got it. He's got it. Chauncey Billups hits the three. Overtime. Amazing.
Out of bounds. Detroit basketball.
Pistons fans, welcome to the Palace Pistons Podcast, part of the Believe Network. I'm your host, Mike Anguilano. Joining me this week are Jasper Apollonia and Aaron Johnson. Fellas, how are we doing?
Doing good. I mean, look, it's an opportunity to get back on the show and talk about all the latest that's happened with the Pistons lately. I know Trajan Langdon is a very, very hot topic right now, so we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about some other things, and it's going to be a good show as always, boys. Glad to have everyone back after having to hop on an emergency show on Friday morning last week.
Yeah, we're hoping we don't have to do another emergency podcast this week. We still haven't gotten much clarity on the Pistons GM or coaching situation for next year. Something tells me that will be happening sooner than later. Look, Trajan Langdon likes to get a jump start on things. He accidentally or purposely updated his Twitter profile bio before the hiring was officially announced. So this guy does not like to wait around. Let's just hope he's a little bit more precise in his decision-making than he is in his tagging, as he accidentally tagged the wrong Pistons account when he said he was the head of president basketball operations. So look, we've had to re-record a couple of these podcasts already. We're no strangers to mistakes. All is forgiven. Let's just make sure he makes the right decisions moving forward. Let's get into it, fellas.
We embrace the mistakes. We thrive with them. But before we get into talking about the new president of basketball operations, I do want to thank our sponsor for this week's show, and that is BetOnline. And BetOnline is your number one source for all the NBA and NHL playoff coverage this season. Every stat, every matchup, even live odds while the games are being played. When the game's over, head on over to the online casino, get in on a game of blackjack or poker, or unwind with one of their over 150 slots games. Head on over to the website today, get in on the action, and don't forget to use our promo code BELIEVE, that's BLEAV, for a 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. Again, that's BLEAV for a 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit when you use BetOnline. BetOnline, the game starts here. Our requisite pre-show plugs for the Palace Pistons Substack. You can get all of our content immediately in your inbox as soon as it hits. Don't have to search it. It will be there for you every Monday. You will get the weekly drive that's written by me that's supposed to summarize all the information from the past week, including Simone Fontecchio apparently having foot surgery that nobody on the local beat reported, at least not that I saw. And then every Wednesday you'll get something from Aaron. Lately it's been, and it will continue to be, scouting reports for potential top 5 picks. We're going to talk about his Donovan Clingan piece today, as well as the center position. And then every Friday you get the podcast. So please subscribe to our Substack if you don't already. Get this information right in your inbox. As soon as it drops, no need to find it, no need to search it. It's right there. Okay, let's talk about Trajan Langdon, who we talked about for 30 minutes last Friday. Probably a little bit longer than we were expecting to talk about him, but there was a lot to talk about. Other than the quick hitter stuff of where he came from, the power he's going to have, all of the quick stuff that we touched on last week. Wanted to talk a little bit about what each of us wants him to do. Our personal wish list for him as the president of basketball operations, which for the uninitiated is going to stack him on top of the general manager and apparently give him oversight of that position, which could mean firing Troy Weaver and Monty Williams. And before we talk about our wish lists and whatnot, I think it's probably best, because it seems like that information about their firing is coming quick. So let's keep it independent of that, since firings are probably going to happen in some capacity, independent of getting rid of Troy Weaver, independent of getting rid of Monty Williams. What is on the wish list for Trajan Langdon, in your opinion? Jasper, I'll start with you. Trades, re-signings, restructurings, what sort of thing do you want to see from Langdon immediately, since he has officially taken over based on his new Twitter/X?
Yeah, I mean, look, there's no point in talking about firings because I think every single Pistons fan feels the exact same way. I'm sure there are some Monty and Weaver slappies out there still roaming about, but we are not them. And I don't think our audience is for the most part either. So for me, actually, my wish list comes off the court, not on the court. And there are so many things on the court we could talk about, but off the court, I have noticed this malaise, this dissatisfaction, this separation of Pistons fans from this team and this organization. What I would like to see Trajan Langdon do is to bring Pistons fans back into the fold. Even if the wins, the playoff wins, are not going to start coming immediately, I still think that there is an opportunity, a badly needed opportunity for him to recapture this fan base. I think like one small thing that I would love to see, and this might not be possible while Tom Gores is owner, I'd love to see Joe Dumars come back to Detroit. Like when is the last time we saw him? I don't think since he was fired, he has been back with this organization. I'd like to see that bridge mended. I would like to see there be an embrace of just what this team means to this city, to its fans, and why. I mean, look, what was it? 290 something straight games the Pistons sold out at one point when they were in the middle of their incredible run. 6 straight Eastern Conference Finals. I would like to see more of that. I would like to see this organization reach out to the fans, to mend those bridges, to make people care about this organization again, because I think that there is such a disconnect right now between the fan base and the front office and ownership. I mean, God, remember when Tom Gores dropped his letter, during the midst of the 28-game losing streak, just how pissed off fans were. I know I was. I know we all were. And I would just like to see this organization take some steps to rebuilding that relationship with the fan base, with the past. I know they do little things here and then, but I don't think it should all be, hey, remember the bad boys? Because let's be honest, a lot of Pistons fans don't remember the bad boys. That was 35 years ago, which is hard to say out loud, but it is true. It's 35 years ago. I would just like to see some more effort put into not just building playgrounds, but actually building a relationship with this community. I think that that's something that is needed if you really want to make Pistons fans care about this next chapter in the history of what is one of, and it is easy to forget, given the last 15 years, the greatest franchises in the history of this league. There is no doubt about that. This is a top 8 franchise in the history of the NBA, even with all the losing. So for me, that's number one on my wish list. I just want to have a reason to care about this organization again. I want a reason to care about these players, to want to support the front office that's there. And that has just been sorely missing since really year one of the Troy Weaver era, probably even further back than then for a lot of Pistons fans. So for me, that's number one on my wish list.
Well, at the top of what I think most Pistons fans' wish list should be is embracing Cade Cunningham and not sitting on hands anymore. I think we saw last year just expecting these young guys to come out and be better than they were last year and not really trying to do all that much with the roster in what was said to be a pivotal offseason. that obviously failed. And that's why the Pistons, that's why Troy Weaver, they're both in the position that they're in right now. So, I think for Langdon, the number one priority should be about embracing Cade Cunningham, embracing the young talent that you have, but let's get a move on. Like let's start doing things. You're going to have $60 million in cap space. You're armed with another top 5 draft pick. Like, let's get moving on making this team good again, right? And for me, that's being aggressive in the trade market, not being afraid to use that cap space in free agency. Even if the class is a little bit weaker, there's still going to be names out there that you can get that will certainly help this team. You cannot be, I don't think people can be of the mindset that, oh, this is a weak free agency class. Like, there's no point in spending money. The sad truth is a lot of these names out there are a lot better than the guys that were on the Pistons roster this past season. So, I think for me and I think for most people, there's going to be a strong desire to get moving quick with Langdon in place now to start righting this ship. I think Cade is certainly frustrated with the lack of progress that this team has made under Troy Weaver, and especially this past season has put a bad taste in everyone's mouth. So I think there's a real desire, a real passion to get things going internally, and it's on Langdon now in this job, being given the biggest opportunity of his career and being given a role that everyone believes he is seemingly ready for with the reviews that he has around the league. Like, let's put the pedal to the metal and get this thing going. No one can sit through an offseason like last year where it was a couple draft picks and then a couple older veteran players, one of them who just was not an NBA player anymore, that was, your quote-unquote big get of the offseason. So there's the number one thing I think Langdon needs to do is as soon as he steps into the facility, which he seemingly already has from what we know. So there's got to be some urgency here to get this moving. Cade Cunningham isn't getting any younger. Not that he's old at all, but like he's ready to go. He's ready to start winning. Embrace that you have one of the prime young talents in the league and get things moving.
Yeah, to build off of your point, I want him to make a decision on the young core. We've called them the core 4. With Cade and with Jaden Ivey and Jalen Duren and Asar Thompson. Jasper's like, no, cut it out. I'd like a decision on the core 4 to be made. If that means moving on from Duren, who we're going to talk about later, if that means moving on from Ivy, if that means dangling Asar because he's the second most valuable piece on the roster, and you want to make a big splash, Aaron, doing something along those lines of bringing in somebody like a really big name. And if it means dangling Asar to do that, because he is more of a project player than I think a lot of people are maybe willing to stomach, to use a term. I want to know what Langdon's just pathway is with the young guys, like what he feels about breaking them up, what he feels about keeping them together. If that is the move, it doesn't seem like it's going to be that move, but how does he want to proceed with the accumulation of assets? The Pistons have had all these picks. What are they going to do with them now? We've talked about a consolidation move. We've talked about some other move to move out multiple assets and get one big one back or one better one back. I want to know his opinion on that core, and I think we're going to see that pretty quickly based off of how fast he's going to have to move in free agency if he wants to stay at the same level with some of these other competitive teams that are going to be vying for that limited free agency pool that you had mentioned. So what does he feel about those young guys, and how does he want to proceed? I'm really interested to see how that's going to work out.
Yeah, there's so much to do. Like it's not an easy job. He wasn't left a great situation. He didn't inherit something that is all that strong right now, but I think there's a pathway to improving quickly, and it's obviously going to be on him and the staff that he puts in place to do that. But I just don't think I'd personally be desirable to sign up and say, let's sit through another year of all the young guys just developing. Maybe you add a small piece here and let's just see what these young guys can do, because last year was just such an indictment on the entire process that the Pistons have gone under through Troy Weaver, that I just don't think you can sit on your hands again and say we'll be better because these guys are a year older. So yeah, I think there's a pathway to getting better. There's a pathway to, like you mentioned, like consolidating some of these assets and young pieces that you have and trying to get a bigger name. I think everyone's talked about those potential fringe all-star or all-star level players that could be available that the Pistons can go after. And I'm curious to see how quickly are the Pistons going to get involved in those talks. Will they get involved in those talks? Will we hear them specifically linked near the draft, on the draft day, or in free agency? Will we hear them getting linked to, Atlanta or New Orleans, trying to go after some of these names, some of these players that are presumably going to be available at a certain price? How aggressive will Langdon be in trying to rebuild this roster? I think there's a million different things you can do. Something that I wanted to also bring up, but we talked about just bringing up one thing, but like, what's his philosophy on this double big situation that Troy Weaver has manifested in Detroit the past few years? Like, does he feel the same way? Does he view Isaiah Stewart as this starting level stretch four that can put the ball in his hands and defend 1 through 5 or 2 through 5, whatever? Like, or does he not view these guys in that same ilk? Does he have a different philosophy? I think from the outside looking in, he's a very wing oriented, length, 3-point shooting, defensive type of guy. I don't necessarily look at what New Orleans has done and say that he embraces that double big system that Detroit's really kind of hung their hats on the past few years. So I'm very curious about that as well. There's so many question marks. There's so many things that could be done, that need to be done. Langdon's got a long road ahead of him, but I think everyone's hoping he attacks it with some pace and can get things turned around quickly.
I'll say this. Look, one of my favorite quotes by John Wooden is, of course, be quick, but don't rush. I mean, it's been said by a million motivational speakers everywhere for years and years now. I think I don't know if I want to see him do a consolidation move at this point. And the reason is, like, those consolidation moves generally come after a team has taken that leap into competitiveness and kind of sees what all the pieces on their rosters, what works, what doesn't. I think of, Mike, your Cleveland Cavaliers 2 years ago. They made the play-in, lost to the Brooklyn Nets, then decided to trade for Donovan Mitchell after that because they realized they needed a little bit more firepower. Colin Sexton wasn't going to cut it. So for me, I look at it and I say, I want to see moves to make this roster better. I don't know if it has to be a consolidation move. Like, for me, if you go out there this offseason and you bring in like Kyle Anderson and Tobias Harris, and I honestly, even like the return of Luke Kennard or something like that, like, I can live with that. I can definitely live with that. And the reason is, like, we saw last year when the Pistons traded for Mike Muscala, just how much better they played. I think for me, if he's going out there and he's quickly, decisively making the moves to improve this team based on their personnel, not just bringing in guys because they're guys, I think that's enough for me this year. Like, yeah, I think you're right, Mike, that you probably do need to make a decision on at least one of the young guys this year. But I think that there is a path to improvement without going all in, without going all out, and using that cap space in a smart way and improving your team, not just on the margins, like in a meaningful manner, but doing so without, breaking the bank to do it, and without spending all that cap space on one player or offloading all your young assets for a star. I don't know if they're at that place yet, as much as I'd love for it to be.
Do you think just kind of operating through free agency gets them to a point where they're meaningfully better. You don't
No,
need to move off of someone like an Ivy or a Duren or Stewart in number 5. Like do you not think that's needed?
no, like I said, like I think they need to make a move with one of the young guys. Like I think one of them at least has to go. I don't see how you can keep all that together after having looked at last year and be like, oh no, this is fine. This is the core. Like, no, there has to be something else in there. I'm just saying, like, I don't think that play needs to be for like an out and out star player, like a top 15, even top 20 player. Frankly, I just don't think you're getting back a top 20 player.
I don't think they have the juice
I
to do
agree.
Yeah, like you don't have that. You don't have
Duren in 5. It still is not enough to get you a top 20 player.
exactly. So I think that there needs to be like a combination of moves. There needs to be work in free agency. There does probably need to be a move off of one of these young guys, and I think we're probably going to talk about one of those guys in just a couple minutes when we start talking about your piece on Donovan Clingan, Aaron. I'm just saying, like, I think that there is a way to meaningfully improve this roster, not to like the playoffs, but like if you can get to where Utah was this last season, these last 2 seasons, I think that is a sizable, meaningful improvement in your record, in the health of your team, without also putting yourself into a position where it's like, I just know that like every fan has the end result of the Blake Griffin trade in the back of their minds. I think that you can improve the roster, put yourself into a much better position, but also have flexibility moving forward, without trading off of more than one of the young guys and the pick, perhaps. So that's how I look at it.
Yeah, I'm not advocating for trading these guys for whatever you can get, because like you guys said, I don't think you're getting, like, there were some people that thought, do we have to include Sarr in a Devin Booker trade? I mean, what are we doing? It's going to take everybody, and that still won't be enough.
Yeah.
So you're just not going to get a top 20 player, and you shouldn't package all 3 of those for a fringe top 25 guy. I don't think that's the right way of going about it either. I still think that you can use 5 and get a decent player that isn't going to, keep pushing your timeline further and further out into the future. I also think they would be pretty naive to not bundle 5 and Ivy or 5 and Duren to see what's out there. Sniff around, to use a Zach Lowe favorite. Sniff around and see what you can get. It doesn't hurt to poke around. And I think you have enough of maybe individually some of those young guys and how they play, to make a justification. Okay, he's good, but we're in a position where we want to make a faster, like we want to speed up the timeline a little bit. Cade is good right now. Let's augment his skill set right now. So yeah, I'm not in favor of like trading 5 Duren and Ivy for whatever you can get just for the sake of making a move. If no move's out there, I don't want them to make a move. I do agree that going through free agency, if that's the best that you can do and you're not going to get hosed on a Jaden Ivey trade, then that's fine. If it's Malik Monk and Tobias Harris, okay, that's fine. Or maybe not Nick Claxton, because I don't know. It depends on what you're paying and what you're doing with Duren. But if it's Monk and Harris, call it in and keep your guys, keep your powder dry, so to speak. Is it going to move the needle enough? No.
Yeah,
it's not. But it's also not going to kill you.
Yeah, I get that. And I'm not saying they need to go out and for the sake of trying to make a big move, but I just don't know how they get meaningfully better just signing Malik Monk and Tobias Harris. Yes, they'll be better without a doubt, but I think there's some real issues with this team in terms of like everything: shooting, defense, effort, intensity, having veterans on the roster. Like those guys certainly help with that, but it's going back to kind of like the first thing on my wish list. Like there needs to be some urgency to make this thing better fast. And I mean, Tobias Harris didn't have a great season in Philadelphia. I'm not sure how confident I am giving him $35 million, even on a shorter term deal, to really believe he's going to come in and make this thing better. Like at that point, I think I'd rather have Simone Fontecchio on whatever deal the Pistons sign him to. So it's like, I don't know. And I'm not the president of basketball operations. I'm not the general manager. I don't know what deals are out there. There might not be a deal out there for a top 30 player that's worth the asking price, but I just hope that you see the Pistons taking those calls, making those calls, getting themselves in these conversations and trying to do something. If the move doesn't materialize, the move doesn't materialize, but I just think you're not going to be able to improve this roster all that meaningfully just using the 5th pick and picking up a couple of guys in free agency and saying, let's run it back again. I think there's going to have to be some sort of move.
Well, that's where I kind of what I'm saying, where it's like, I don't think it is just talent needs to be brought in. It needs to be fit for this roster. Like one of the things you just said, like veterans, and not just veterans, like one of the names I just threw out there, Kyle Anderson. Like, did you see, I know the clip went around on Twitter, X, whatever you want to call it, him calling out what was essentially the game-winning play from Karl Anthony Towns on that three-pointer. Like, those are the kind of guys they need. Micah Muscala was not some massive game changer because he's such a great talent. No, he changed what the Pistons second unit was able to do because he fit with the other pieces they had on the court, especially Asar Thompson, and he knows how to play the game of basketball on a winning level in the NBA. He's been on good teams. He knows how this works. And like, those are the kind of guys where I'm like, look, if you can't get a Brandon Ingram, whoever, it doesn't, you know what I mean? Like, whoever it is, if you can't get them in the trade market for a price that you can stomach as either the front office or the Pistons fan, I think then your priority has to be finding guys that just make the roster better. Simone Fontecchio is never going to make an all-star team, guys. He isn't. But we saw just how much better he made this team because of the skills that he brings to the table. That, to me, has to be almost more of a priority than talent, because let's be brutally honest about it. Outside of 4 or 5 guys, most of the players on this roster are not NBA talent. And you bring in any rotation player off of 90% of the other teams in this league, they are going to be more talented than a lot of the guys the Pistons were playing last year. So for me, I think that has to, like, yeah, you're totally right, Aaron. There has to be a sense of urgency, but there needs to be that idea of like, we're not just bringing in guys to give them a shot, like Hamidou Diallo or Frank Jackson. We're bringing in guys to fit a very specific role, a very specific need, and to complement whoever we decide to keep on this roster, to complement them, to make them better, to make the team better, and to make it healthier, and not just healthier, but smarter. This needs to be a smarter team. This needs to be a more professional team. Honestly, there's just been such a lack of professionalism from this organization. I think that comes back to my point, where it's like why Pistons fans just started tuning out, because it's just like, screw these guys. Screw these guys. This is a totally unprofessional organization. They don't give a shit. And excuse my French. But yeah, I think that needs to be no offense to Killian Hayes. But like, that needs to be, I think, the priority. It's be quick, but don't hurry. That's what it needs to be. So,
Aaron, do you bleep out swearing?
No.
I don't know. Do we have an explicit tag on this? Are we?
Sorry to the kids out there. Sorry for cussing. For my sketch people. Anyone that watches sketch, there you go.
I think we're fine.
We might get.
If you're a Pistons fan, you've cursed plenty, no matter the age.
I was gonna say that is nothing compared to 90% of what I said to my TV this year. So,
yeah, exactly. It's just, their ability to get better is just, they just have so few levers that they can pull before you start getting to trading the young guys, other than cap space. And if you're going to pay the small market tax on a guy like Tobias Harris, then I would say forget it. He's not worth the small market tax that you're going to have to pay to get him to go there. Maybe he takes a discount because he was here and was liked here and liked being here supposedly, but who knows? Let's talk about number 5 pick, and specifically Donovan Clingan. Aaron, you wrote a piece about him that dropped last week about, it dropped last week, right?
No, it just
dropped yesterday.
Dropped on Wednesday.
Yeah, it dropped yesterday. I read it earlier, so I'm all mixed up. Yeah, it dropped yesterday or 2 days ago if you're listening to this on Friday. About Donovan Clingan was very good. Talked about his potential pick at 5 and what that would mean for the Pistons. And it sort of cascaded into a discussion about Jalen Duren as well. So, Aaron, do you want to talk about your piece, talk about Donovan Clingan as a fit at 5, how he would slot in with the current group of bigs that the Pistons have?
Donovan Clingan is quickly risen up my own big board of targets for the Detroit Pistons with the 5th pick. I've been very high on guys like Dalton Knecht. I like someone like Reed Shepherd. But Donovan Clingan, the more that I watch, the more that I look at his game, the more that I envision his NBA career, I see a center that can be a defensive hub for a team that has always said they want to have this tough, physical, defensive-minded identity, yet they have not had that in a decade plus. So I view Clingan as a guy that can help instill that sort of identity with a roster that has a couple other defensive-minded prospects and younger players in Asar Thompson and Isaiah Stewart. But Clingan was an absolute monster at UConn. Went back after a freshman season where he didn't start a single game, but was still a key player for them. And he was just one of the best players in the Big East all season long, and was one of the best players in the NCAA tournament. He's a bit old school. He doesn't shoot 6 threes a game, and he doesn't put the ball on the deck and do a bunch of ball handling around, the perimeter. He's not some sort of offensive initiator or anything like that. He plays a lot in the paint, but he's very good at what he does. He alters shots at the rim. He blocks shots at the rim. He defends the glass very, very well. And offensively, he is super, super efficient, scoring at the rim, scoring out of post-ups, playing in the pick and roll, scoring on the offensive glass. Like, he does so many things very, very well. He might not have the biggest skill set, the widest skill set, but what he is good at, he's really, really good and efficient at. And I think there's a very clear pathway to him playing minutes next season, being a productive player next season. And if you're Detroit and you are looking to get better and the plan is to use the 5th pick, I would strongly consider looking at Clingan. He is a very, very solid defensive-minded big, and I think that would help kind of recharge this identity under Langdon as a defensive-minded team, something that they say every year they want to be but have yet to live up to. I think Clingan would be a really good option there.
I thought you did a great job in your piece, Aaron. First off, not to overly donut glaze you, but I think you did a great job of breaking down exactly why Clingan can be a really good piece for this team, but also his weaknesses. And I'm going to hit on the weaknesses a little bit because there is definitely downside there. I think of it, look, he's great rim protector. I worry about the pick and roll defense. And, I don't know if you guys saw the 27-minute low light video of Jalen Duren's pick and roll defense that's been going around. But look, it's a real thing. NBA post defenders are not just post defenders anymore. They have to be extraordinarily versatile. That's why you saw in this year's defensive first team 4 bigs. All 4 of those bigs, you can debate on Rudy Gobert, but at least 3 of those guys are not just great rim protectors. They're great perimeter defenders as well for big men. They're able to maneuver outside of the deep post. I think for me, I see Clingan and I see I'm just getting Walker Kessler kind of vibes from him. And that's not a bad thing. Walker Kessler is a great block guy, but that's kind of all he is defensively. And there's a reason why Utah decided to play, John Collins more minutes over him at the center. Even though John Collins has definite weaknesses on the defensive end, Walker Kessler isn't versatile enough offensively or defensively to really trust him with a 30-minute per night role. Yes, I think Clingan absolutely could be a guy that blocks 2 shots a game in the NBA, for sure. I think he's a guy that can come in and at least solidify what you do in the post. And that's super valuable. Do not get me wrong. But I worry that he doesn't have the offensive versatility to offset those weaknesses defensively. And, you say, I agree. I think he could be very effective in the pick and roll, but teams don't really play post offense anymore. Is that really what you want to do with Kate Cunningham on your team? Throw it into the post? Because, buddy, I just watched James Wiseman for 2 years, and I'm good on that. I'm good on post scoring. Can he pass? I don't really think so. Can he dribble? I don't really think so. And you look at the best centers in the league, those guys can do it all. You're talking about Bam Adebayo. You're talking about Nikola Jokic. You're talking about MVP candidate Domantas Sabonis, apparently. Those are all guys that can put the ball on the floor and can pass the ball as well. I don't know if Clingan has that kind of versatility. That being said, it's a weak draft. We all know this. And if you do get a Walker Kessler type out of the 5th pick, that honestly might be the best use of it in this year's draft. So I'm a little torn on Clingan. I still don't really know where I stand. I need to watch more of him, but I do have serious doubts about his ability to step into a starting role on day one, or frankly, to be a 30-minute per night big man in this league overall. I just worry about the versatility. I worry about the fit outside of his own game in a more versatile, free-flowing offense. I just don't know.
I'll push back.
That's fair. You go ahead, Aaron.
I'd push back a little bit there because I actually think passing is one of his is more like, it's cliche to use like underrated, but it's like not as notable that he actually does have some unique passing chops for a big. And you can kind of see that say that with a lot of different bigs. Like I think people might even say that with Jalen Duren a little bit because of how much he handles the ball at the free throw line and, tries to throw these unique passes for a big man. But I really do see a pathway to Clingan playing 25 minutes a night. Like I think it's hard to get a center that plays 35 minutes a night in today's NBA that isn't a top of the line center. Like I think most teams are starting to just I look at what Langdon's team did in New Orleans this year. It was like Jonas Valanciunas played like 20 to 25 minutes. Larry Nance played like the other 18, 20 minutes, depending on the matchups that night. Like, I think there's a world where you can certainly make it work. And again, like if this was a draft where there was some different prospects that had this other great star potential that it was like, fine, just take the risk on them. Like I see Clingan as a guy that's going to have a long NBA career. Obviously there are weaknesses to his game, but he's also 20 years old. Can he take that Brooke Lopez type of trajectory where like he comes in as this, defensive minded big, but expands his offensive game, starts shooting the ball more? Like, can he start shooting 3-pointers in, a few years? Like, I think those are all realistic things now. Like, it's something that he's obviously going to work on because that's what most bigs are starting to do in the NBA nowadays is shoot those outside shots. So it's like, he's not a perfect prospect right now. He's not going to be a perfect player right now. You're not going to get that at 5. You can look at the deficiencies for any prospect at 5, but I don't know. I think if you're talking about maybe changing your center position up, maybe moving on from Jalen Duren, I think if you're going to draft a center, like Clingan's the second best center in the draft behind Alex Sarr, who I would imagine will most likely be the first or second pick in the draft. So I think you could do worse than taking Clingan at 5. Again, it's not a perfect jack. He's not number 1 on my big board. I've already said Dalton Connect I really, really like. I like Reed Shepherd as well. If someone like Zachary Richichet is there, doubt it, but I don't know. He's an option. There's a lot of guys in this draft that you could talk me into at 5. I've said that before. I'll say it again. All of them are good at certain things. All of them have some pretty glaring weaknesses. That's what makes this class so much weaker, seemingly, than what it's looked like in these past few years. So that's where I'm at.
And it's very fluid with the top 5 pick. With really every team that's in the top 5. ESPN's Jonathan Givony said that the Atlanta Hawks are very interested in Clingan. Specifically, I think it was Clingan has a lot of fans in the Hawks front office. And he is in play at 5 or at 1. I don't think that's actually true. But some of the mocks I saw had Clingan going 3 to Houston. Some had him going 7 or 6 rather. So it's really fluid, as we've said on the last 4 episodes. This show is that it's a very interesting top 5 with some teams that could trade out of that. Givony also said that he wouldn't be surprised if a team like Memphis, if Clingan did start to fall, they would want to move up and draft him to get their center of the future. But again, it kind of goes back to, how does Trajan Langdon want to approach the double big? Whether you have Duren and Stewart or Clingan and Stewart, what's going to be the methodology there for doing the double big? And speaking of Jalen Duren, if they have Donovan Clingan at 5 and Connect is gone and Richichet is gone and Sarr is gone, and you don't want to take someone else, you want to take a center, what is that going to hold for the future of Jalen Duren, who Jasper, you alluded to, has a 27-minute video on Twitter about him being just abused in the pick and roll defensively. If you have the opportunity to draft Clingan, or let's just say that they do draft him, what does that look like? And even before the draft, what is Duren's future going to look like? Because again, that's one of the few levers the Pistons have to get better, is if you want to move on from Duren, his value is, pretty much centered in the fact that he's young and can rebound really well and can score the basketball. He doesn't have super high defensive IQ right now, but he's 20. So Jasper, since, we were talking about moves and trading young guys and whatnot, what's your feeling on Jalen Duren's future? Should the Pistons draft Donovan Clingan at 5, or, even if they were going to get Alex Sarr at 1, what is the future of Jalen Duren look like on this roster anyway?
This might sound a little bit bizarre, but I actually think I would be more inclined to hold on to Duren if Clingan was the pick, kind of for the reasons that Aaron just outlined in regards to New Orleans. Like, having a more offensive-minded center and a more defensive-minded center on the roster, I think that there is value to that. I think otherwise, if Clingan's not the pick, I would personally be trying to either sign somebody in free agency or make a trade for a center. I mean, Valanciunas is a guy who's going to be on the free agency market. Like, I could also justify, you pick up Valanciunas. I think his value is definitely lower than it was even last year, just with the way that he kind of got just kicked off the floor in the playoffs. I think that he would definitely be a guy I'd be interested in looking at to pair with Clingan. Like, I think you could make that work. I with Duren, it's just so hard, man, because there is talent. There's certainly talent. We've all seen it, especially on the offensive end. But man, look, I didn't need a 27-minute video to tell me Jalen Duren can't play pick and roll or pick and pop defense. Like, dude, I watched it every single game. I honestly would say, more than any other player on this team, there were so many plays defensively with Jalen Duren where I just got up and I'm like in my room watching the game and like yelling out loud, "What are you doing? What are you doing?" Because some of the things he does just make absolutely no sense. Like sagging off of Kristaps Porzingis at the 3-point line. What are you doing? Read a scouting report. So for me, I want to believe in Duren. I still think there is a much higher ceiling for him defensively than he's shown through his first 2 seasons. But if they are going to move off of one of the young guys, he's first on my list. I'm sorry to say. Like, I still believe in the talent of Jaden Ivey, despite all of his flaws, far more than I believe in the talent of Jalen Duren, because he just hasn't been able to put it together. Even, Jaden Ivey's inconsistent. Jalen Duren's inconsistent. But when Jaden Ivey is on, he looks unstoppable. When Jalen Duren is on, he still does things that you're just like, this is great. This is really good. Is this top 10 center in the NBA good? I think when you look around the league, no, it's not. Like, the flashes from Ivy for me portends to a much higher ceiling than Duren's does. Like, I think best case scenario, like, poor broke man's Bam Adebayo. I don't even know. And you look around the league, there's just so many big men who can pass a little bit, who can score, and don't give you great defense. Like, it's too easy of a skill set to find. So unless he is really showing you something in off-season workouts, I don't know, man. I just don't know with Jalen Duren. I'm not saying I'm giving up, but, like, I need more. I need more. If he's on the roster after this year and I don't see a huge improvement defensively, I'm so ready to move on.
Yeah, no, I think Duren is the guy that is probably the obvious choice to get moved if the Pistons do decide to move one of the young guys. And I kind of laid out some of this in the piece that I wrote on Clingan. Like, there's a world where you can draft Donovan Clingan and keep Jalen Duren. There's a world where you draft Donovan Clingan and it makes Jalen Duren expendable. I mean, let's look at a team like Washington. Like, could you trade Jalen Duren to Washington if they want to take Ricochet with their what are they, 2? I think they're 2. Let's say they want to take Ricochet, but they still really need a big man on the roster. Like, could you get one of their other forwards on the roster for Duren? And could you get is that what makes Kyle Kuzma available? Or can you get a Corey Kispert or a Denny Advia? Like, do you get something like one of those guys and another asset from Washington, allow them to take Ricochet, and then they get a young big to work in with their rebuild, and you're still able to draft Donovan Clingan or go sign Nicholas Claxton? Like, there's a world where that makes sense for a multitude of reasons, but there's also that world where I don't think Donovan Clingan's day one ready to give you 30 minutes a night. You need 2 bigs. I mean, we saw what happened this past season when your backup center was James Wiseman. It's an atrocity to the eyes. It's unfair to mankind. They need to have a couple centers that are capable of giving you 20, 25 minutes a night, depending on matchups or foul trouble. I think you could make it work between Clingan and Duren because they have some strengths that the others, it's a weakness for. So I think there's a world where you keep both. I think there's a world where you can draft Clingan and move on from Duren and help this roster, because there's going to be a team that wants a 20-year-old center that has the 2 years of experience that Jalen Duren has. I think, his value is probably lower than it was after his first season in the league. I think if you look back at the film this past year, you saw a disengaged young player who was not competing well enough on the defensive end on a nightly basis, and by the end of the year was really forcing things on the offensive end. But still, 20 years old and 2 years of NBA experience with some very big games under his belt. Like, he's not a negative asset in any stretch of the imagination. So you can use him to get something of value to help your team if you decide you want to go in a different direction at the 5 spot.
I also would understand where, like, an argument of, like, no, I don't want to trade these guys because of the coaching situation this last season. Like, I think we would all be in total agreement that Monty Williams did no favors to any of the Pistons' young players. Like, Jaden Ivey looked worse as a sophomore than he did as a rookie. Jalen Duren, I think, also probably looked worse as a sophomore than he did as a rookie. I haven't gone through all the tape, but, like, neither did Monty Williams, so fair enough. I think that's, like, an argument that you can certainly make. Like, we talk about disengaged. It's a young team. They didn't have good veterans. They didn't have good coaching. I think that you can talk yourself into saying, look, what's on film is not good, but if we bring in somebody who can mentor him on the court, if we can bring in a coach who can push the right buttons to get him to improve, I completely buy that argument. Like you said, he's 20 years old. He's a great athlete, super strong, is talented. I don't see I don't see this as being like a needed trade. Like you got to get Jalen Duren off the roster. He's garbage. No, I can absolutely talk myself into seeing a much better outcome than this last year. But I think we're all in agreement. The struggles were very real, and it was very poor. And I would also, gander that we all feel much lower on him than we did last season or when he was drafted. So there's so many arguments you can make in favor or against any of the players on this roster. And that's obviously going to be the case whenever you win 14 games in a season. So
this is all that lies ahead of Trajan Langdon in the first few days of his role. He has to decide on the futures of the team's general manager and head coach, then consider replacements if he decides to move off of one or both of them. He has to get all of the scouting intel from the current staff that the team has right now. He has to do his own draft evaluations and bring in his own draft people if that's something he desires. With the draft less than a month away, he's probably not as familiar with some of the top names in the draft, considering New Orleans is not picking near where Detroit was. So there's some extended work there. And then you get right into free agency and all of the moves there. So much to do, so little time. We got to get the ball rolling here. And I think, kind of going back to what we said at the top of the show, we'll see what happens with the general manager and the coaching staff. You'd imagine that that's the first thing that's going to get addressed by Langdon one way or the other. But man, it's hard to have your mind not spinning on all of the various things that have to be done. And if you're Langdon, you're probably not getting many hours of sleep and much time off right now over these next few months, because there's so much to do and seemingly so little time to get it all done.
No wonder he got a head start on his Twitter bio.
Yeah.
The second he signs that paper, man, it is down to business. There's no time to get online.
Off the list. I don't have to.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, a million other things to do, but at least I got the Twitter bio updated.
Yeah, exactly. He's got a lot of work ahead of him, starting with potentially the coach and the GM, which we were hoping would have some resolution before today's show, but we'll just have to save that for the emergency podcast and Jasper's girlfriend's bathroom tomorrow. Aaron, do you want to run us through our end of show plugs as we have gone through our two big topics for this? Is a long episode. We're already at an hour. We stretched two topics into an hour.
No, remember we had the two failed recordings before that.
That's right.
We're a little bit less, but we're probably putting.
I did so much to wipe that from my memory.
Well, it's okay. We're at the end now, so we've made it. But yeah, I'd be happy to give the post show plugs. I mean, that's probably my favorite thing to do at this point. First off, wherever you're watching, wherever you're listening, give us a follow, hit that subscribe button, leave a like, leave a comment. Let us know what you think. Like, who do you want the Pistons to take at 5? Do you think Donovan Clingan is a worthy choice? Like, should the Pistons be willing to move off Jalen Duren? I love all the engagement in the YouTube comment section. It's very interesting to see what people think. There are some people that are pretty in line with our line of thinking, or one of ours line of thinking, and then there's people that are on the way opposite side of the spectrum and are thinking way differently. So let us know what you think. Go over all of our socials at Palace of Pistons on X, at Palace of Pistons on Facebook, Palace of Pistons on Instagram, Palace of Pistons on TikTok. Give us a follow over there. We're doing some great things over there. All that support helps us. And most importantly, take the 30 seconds to go to our Substack page, palaceofpistons.com, type in your email, subscribe to our newsletter for free, and get all of our work directly to your email inbox, so you don't have to worry about checking our website or our social medias, typing it in Google, like it'll just come straight to you. So you don't have to do any of that work to try to find the post at a later point in time. It'll be in your email always as soon as we release it. So give us a look over there. All of that stuff greatly helps us, and appreciate all the support. The numbers have been growing exponentially lately, and we love seeing all that engagement and all that conversation. So appreciate everyone for the support.
Yeah, if you're as busy as Trajan Langdon is going to be in these next couple weeks, that's your sign to hit the subscribe to the Palace of the Pistons Substack. You need to save every single second you can. So that'll if you're strapped for time, do it. And if you want to read some great stuff like Aaron's piece, come on, just go ahead. Like there's a lot of great stuff on there, and we're gonna have even more coming your way. So it's just very fun to see all those people subscribing and in our YouTube comments. We really do love it. Like, shout out to the guy who said bring back the intro. I made that intro for our podcast. That makes me so happy. Like, just
That's
even
true.
one person enjoying it, it really does mean the world to us. So thank you to everybody out there. Like, it's genuinely appreciated.
Yes, we all appreciate the level of interaction. Aaron and I started doing this, and there was like no interaction. It's just two guys riffing about Andre Drummond for like 40 minutes, and that was it. That was the end. And now there's people commenting and caring. Even if it's a little bit of malice, doesn't matter. It's still fun to have the interaction. So we do definitely appreciate it. I think that's a good place to stop with our plugs and with Jasper's sentimental moment of somebody wanting his intro to stay. It's a good way to wrap up this edition of the Palace Pistons podcast. I'd like to thank our sponsor this week's episode, and that is BetOnline. And don't forget to use the promo code BELIEVE, BLEAV, for your 50% welcome bonus when you use BetOnline. For my co-hosts, Jasper Apollonia and Aaron Johnson, I'm Mike Anguilano. Thank you so much for joining us in this edition of the Palace Pistons Podcast, part of the Believe Network, and we will see you all next time.